A Spotify executive has had strong words for the Duke and Duchess of Delusion, calling them grifters. And a bit of a swear word. So, is he right to describe the royal renegades as a pair of hustlers? Lady Victoria Harvey and Nina Mishkov do battle on that in The Clash. And amid reports of a mega money deal with Dior that would make her the highest paid influencer in the world, would the iconic fashion label tarnish its reputation by getting involved with the Sussex brand? Well, Star Daily Telegraph columnist Celia Walden offers her unflinching analysis shortly. Plus, I can't wait for this. It's who we need this Monday night. My royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier. Along with the Meghan drama, they're going to be discussing if Prince William took some of the shine off the King's historic Trooping the Colour. Also on the way, in the most disturbing example yet of gender extremism taking over our schools, a teacher laid into their 13-year-old pupil for refusing to accept that their classmate could identify as a cat.
How dare you? You've just really upset someone. Saying things like should be in an asylum.
I don't think that. I just think if they want to identify as a cat or something, then they're like genuinely unwell.
Lawrence Fox will respond to the rest of that terrifying clip as he advises what parents can do to protect their children from this insane ideology. And as the boss of Wix says customers with trans-critical views are bigots who are not welcome in their stores, has he consigned the company to the same fate as woke Bud Light? Fleet Street legend Calvin McKenzie takes a hammer to the DIY retailer in Uncancelled. We'll also have a look at tomorrow's newspapers hot off the press, and as ever, a brand new Greatest Briton Uni and Jackass will be named too. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Let's go. You're watching GB News, Britain's news channel. So we await the potential vote on Boris Johnson, the House of Commons. We'll bring you the results live as they happen and my special digest on what I think has been a farcical few hours at Westminster, straight after the headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thanks very much indeed. Well, the top story tonight, on it goes. The House of Commons continues to debate on the report that found Boris Johnson lied over Partygate. Let's take you live to the House of Commons, where that debate continues tonight. MPs are trying to decide, and they have been for the last few hours as well, whether or not to sanction the former Prime Minister. That's after the Privileges Committee last week found he repeatedly misled the House of Commons. Number 10 says Rishi Sunak is skipping the debate because he doesn't want to influence the decision of MPs. We saw Penny Mordaunt earlier on ratifying that decision of the Privileges Committee. And we also saw earlier on this afternoon the former Prime Minister Theresa May saying the report would be a small but important step, she said, in restoring people's trust in politics.
I will vote in favour of the report of the Privileges Committee. I urge all members of this House to do so, to uphold standards in public life, to show that we all recognise the responsibility we have to the people we serve, and to help to restore faith in our parliamentary democracy.
Well, let's bring you up to date now on what's happening in the North Atlantic. There's been a breaking news story developing throughout the afternoon. We can tell you one British man is believed to be one of 5 people on board a submarine that's gone missing on its way to see the famous Titanic wreckage in the North Atlantic. The US tour firm OceanGate has confirmed one of its vessels and its crew are missing in the North Atlantic. And we know also from GB News investigations this afternoon, a man posted on social media asking for his prayers for his stepfather, Captain Hamish Harding. The pilot, who owns an aviation company, wrote on Instagram just yesterday saying he'd be taking part in a dive to the wreckage today. These are the pictures, if you're watching on television, that he posted just yesterday. We understand tickets for that submersible to go down and look at the Titanic cost just under £200,000 a person. The Coast Guard lost contact with the vessel around an hour and 45 minutes into the dive. We do know, though, that it has 96 hours of life support available for a crew of 5. So we're keeping tabs on that story for you throughout the evening here on GB News. Now, in other news today, police have broken up an Albanian gang that allegedly brought migrants into the UK on small boats. 3 members of the crime group were arrested early on this morning. And if you're watching on television, you can see those officers from the National Crime Agency executing those arrest warrants. GB News understands the group has been charging migrants more than £7,000 a crossing. Now, King Charles has attended his first service for the Order of the Garter today as monarch. Thousands of people gathered outside Windsor Castle to catch a glimpse of His Majesty alongside Queen Camilla outside St George's Chapel. The Prince and Princess of Wales also in attendance. 800 guests invited. We can see former Prime Minister Tony Blair there on the steps of St George's Chapel, but conspicuous by his absence, shall we say, the Duke of York not there, despite being a member of the Order of the Garter. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The persecution of Boris Johnson made it to the House of Commons today. The opposition teamed up with Tory wets and Ramonas, who have long coveted an opportunity to finish the political career of the man who delivered Brexit when the establishment wanted to overturn the biggest democratic mandate in British history. And what a pathetic sight it was. MPs doing all they can to believe it's up to them and the MSM, especially Woke, ITV and The Guardian, who were both name-checked by Privileges Committee Chairwoman Harriet Harman, up to them to decide who should be Prime Minister and an MP, not the millions who voted at the general election. Look at the contempt for any opposition when my colleague here at GB News, the brilliant Jacob Rees-Mogg, dared to challenge Harman on her obvious bias leading the kangaroo court against Boris.
We undertook this inquiry scrupulously sticking to the rules and processes laid down by this House under standing orders and following the precedents of this House.
In relation to the precedent set by the Judicial Committee of the House of Lords, when a decision on which Lord Hoffman was involved was set aside not because he was biased, but because of the perception of bias. In relation to her famous tweets, how does she think she met the Hoffman test?
This episode has shown that wrongdoing has not gone undiscovered and attempts to cover it up have failed. Many journalists played their part, and in particular, I want to mention Pippa Crerar and Paul Brand. Democracy needs a free press.
What a shame those 2 journalists didn't do any investigating into what's going on in Scotland with the SNP right now and Nicola Sturgeon. Most Boris allies rightly stayed away from the sham. A source close to the ex-Prime Minister explained that decision to me today this way. Boris wants people to not go at all because it's a sham that only plays into Labour's hands. This process is unnecessary, cruel, and he's not playing any part of it. And I have to say, I think that was the right call, as the hysteria from the opposition benches soon proved.
Boris Johnson lied. A new low in Boris Johnson's disregard for standards in public life.
For those people who are abstaining, they are guilty not just of cowardice, but of complicity with the very contempt for which Boris Johnson has been found responsible.
I think at the very least they should show some remorse for that cynicism, accept the recommendations of this report and vote for those recommendations. And if they don't, I hope their cowardly refusal will dog them for the rest of their political lives.
Isn't the truth that Boris has lied for so long and so often that it can come as no surprise that he's lying in this instance?
Perhaps the saddest moment tonight, though, showing the Conservative Party is now in a full-blown civil war, was the way the failed Tory wets and Ramonas lied up to attack Boris, the man who secured their party a landslide majority at the last election.
It is important to show the public that there is not one rule for them and another for us. Indeed, I believe we have a greater responsibility than most to uphold the rules and to set an example. I will vote in favour of the report of the Privileges Committee. I urge all members of this House to do so, to uphold standards in public life, to show that we all recognise the responsibility we have to the people we serve, and to help to restore faith in our parliamentary democracy.
Even though Boris Johnson has absented himself from this House, almost to some degree making this report somewhat academic, the nation wants to see its conclusion. The nation who puts us here wants to make sure that this process reaches its conclusion. I repeat again that I will be supporting this report here today in the House.
Some brave Tories were prepared to speak up for Boris, however, even though he had asked them to avoid the debate altogether.
Everybody in this place knows no minister stands at that dispatch box and knowingly misleads. They have to take counsel from people who advise them.
The reality is that when Tony Blair lied and lied and lied, you lot covered up for him.
Indeed they did. I think those Tories were right, especially seen as a bombshell new poll by YouGov reveals that Boris remains far more popular than Fishy Rishi among Conservative voters who voted for the party in 2019. And that is what matters ahead of the next election. The media hasn't finished, though, with the apparently impartial, yeah, right, Good Morning Britain on Woke ITV openly lobbying the PM live on air to vote against Boris.
Promised professionalism, accountability, integrity at every level. Boris Johnson has undermined all of those. Do you not need to set an example and vote for him to be punished for that?
As I said, this is a matter for the House. It's not a government matter.
Did you notice she didn't even try and hide her bias by posing that as a question? She just stated it as a fact. Look, perhaps it was left best put by the former PM Liz Truss, who told me this on Thursday night.
Never, ever, ever write Boris off. That is something that I think is very, very clear, and I'm sure we will hear more from him.
I think so, because the Commons witch hunt today turned Boris Johnson into a martyr. And to respond now, my superstar panel. Former Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng, the journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth, and the former Brexit Party MEP Belinda de Lucy. So, Kwasi Kwarteng, you decided not to show up today. That's what
Absolutely.
Boris was asking his allies.
Boris said, and I think it was clearly the case that they were going to stitch him up. There was no way in which he was going to win that vote. And you saw some of those speeches. It was all the same crowd, you know, Caroline Lucas, Fangam Debonair, Yvette Cooper nodding, you know, very sagely by her side. Theresa May, who's never forgiven Boris for actually succeeding her and delivering what she failed to deliver, and actually getting a majority when she lost her majority. And so it was all the same crowd. And I felt that it was better probably not to take part in that trial.
You do still support Boris, though?
Look, I don't think he did everything right. I don't think anyone is perfect. But I think he did a considerable amount for this country. I think he delivered Brexit. He won the mayoralty twice. He won the biggest Conservative majority in 30 years. Essentially, he's been hounded out of the House of Commons.
And a gross overreaction from the Privileges Committee, wasn't it?
I think so.
Look at what they did with Margaret Ferry, you know, the SNP MP, who actually was found guilty in court for the way that she spread COVID, and they purposefully reduced her suspension to just 9 days.
So I think ever since 2016, and it's not for all Remainers, many Remainer friends, Remainer colleagues who've been sensible, but there's been a core of people who have never forgiven Boris, essentially for leading the Brexit and Brexit for winning. And we know who they are, and they will never, ever forgive him. And I think for them, they see this as some revenge or retribution.
Revenge of the Ramonas, Belinda de Lucy.
Oh, yes. It rather sticks in my throat watching these MPs froth at the mouth in outrage over Boris misleading them not on war, not on drugs, not on killing anyone, but on eating cake and showing themselves to be beacons of democracy defenders and honour, when these are the very same people who tried every trick in the book to overturn a historic democratic vote. They misled the country. But it's OK to mislead millions of the electorate, isn't it? Because they get away with lying to us.
And I think what Bob Seeley, he made a very good point.
Yeah.
Iraq. I mean, you know, those lies those misrepresentations
cost
hundreds and thousands of Iraqi lives and British and American lives.
Well,
they died violent deaths.
Let me bring Benjamin Butterworth in here, because, Benjamin, you know, your hero is Mr. Tony Blair. He's your political hero. He was never held to account for his despicable lies which led the UK into an illegal war in Iraq. And yet you believe in this persecution of Boris Johnson over, as Belinda says, a few pieces of cake, which he's already accepted a fixed penalty notice for.
I mean, look,
what a hypocrite you are.
I'd say something that I was just looking up who the most popular prime ministers are, and still, by a clear margin, Tony Blair is the most popular prime minister of this century. So if you think
he lied,
bad,
though, didn't
if
he?
you think he's bad, then just how awful have the other ones that have followed him on the Tory side
No, but he
been?
did get into trouble on the Iraq business. I mean, he was, you know...
But he lied. Let's just be honest, he lied.
It is so revealing, Kwasi, that the person you have to go to excuse Boris Johnson is someone that left office 15,
I don't have to. I mean, I just remember Alistair Campbell. I follow him, and actually, on a personal level, I find him quite engaging. I have to confess that. But publicly, he comes up with total nonsense. And this is a man who stole a master's thesis off the internet and souped it up, the dodgy shit. Everyone's forgotten that.
Sexed it up.
And then he's talking... He talks about ethics, he talks about integrity...
And morality.
And he talks about morality.
Kwasi, he's the one who the BBC and Sly News booked to talk about Boris Johnson.
I cannot believe...
You
because I
couldn't
remember
make
it.
I mean, how do you defend that?
He took a master's thesis from the internet.
Yeah.
I mean,
and then edited it and pretended it was
and
a
led us
British
into
document.
war.
Well, look, you know, you might think it's this kangaroo court, but it's absolutely clear that a majority Conservative committee has found that he lied and lied again. The advice he said to the House that he'd been told everything was OK was not true. And as someone who doesn't particularly want a Conservative government, I'm quite happy for you to carry on this circus because the voters are absolutely clear. There's only one Prime Minister more unpopular than Boris Johnson, and that's Liz Truss. And so you keep parading out these characters
Not according to the polls
you'll get a
today.
Labour majority.
Not according to the polls today.
That was under Conservative voters.
Yeah, that's right.
You ain't winning a government with Conservative voters.
No, but that's who we need. It's for the people who voted Conservative in 2019.
Friend, Rory Stewart, and I mentioned him because he's sort of Alistair Campbell's partner in crime.
Yeah.
He was always the most popular. But of course, he was popular with people who were never in a month of Sundays going to vote Conservative. He was always, oh, we love Rory Stewart. Are you going to vote Conservative? Oh, I'd never vote Conservative. I mean, this is completely insane.
I mean,
and it was very striking that, as you say in this poll, Boris still enjoys quite a lot of support among people who voted Conservative.
More support than Rishi Sunak.
Yes, I mean, that was...
But this shows... I mean, you have turned in to, you know, the Tory party on your side of that party, and Dan Wootton, most of all. You're behaving like Jeremy Corbyn and the momentum...
please.
That is obsessed with the purity.
It's just a laughable comment.
You're not listening to the country, you're listening to a niche of the party, and that is such a dangerous place to be.
Neither
and
parties are listening to the country.
I think most people in this country are sick of the psychodrama of the Tories.
Look,
you said to Channel 4 recently that you wouldn't be doing things like you've just said. You said that you must support Rishi Sunak and you want the Boris Johnson drama to end.
I am supporting Rishi Sunak did what I did.
You called it a
He did exactly what I...
It was a stitch-up.
You just called this committee
Rishi
a stitch-up.
Sunak has done exactly what I did today. He has not gone in there. He's not given speeches, you know, kicking Boris while he's down. He's not gone in there. He hasn't even voted. And I've done exactly what Rishi Sunak has done.
But Rishi
and I've always said, well, the reason why I called it that is that if you looked at all of their public statements, they were all against Boris before
it's a stitch-up.
Before the reporting.
It's a stitch-up. And you know what? You don't even have to support Boris Johnson.
Yeah. It's not about Boris.
Belinda doesn't even support Boris Johnson.
No, I don't.
She's sitting here as a Brexiteer saying this is a stitch-up. Surprise, surprise, the one person who doesn't think it's a stitch-up in the room, the person who voted for Remain. That's all I'm saying. The Ramona. The Ramona in the room.
Look,
final word, Kwasi.
Final word, I think Boris's committee were clearly against him. They were tweeting against him. They'd spoken against him. They'd done interviews against him. And if this was if they were actually a jury, the defence attorney would have struck them, would have challenged them all.
Yeah.
And said these guys aren't doing it in good faith.
I'm pretty well. You know, he literally got a fight. I'm pretty sure a court of law would not be on Boris Johnson's side.
No, maybe. Well, that's another issue.
Kwasi, Benjamin Butterworth, Belinda Lucy. What a superstar panel that with me all night, so don't go anywhere. But also on the way, Royal Masterminds lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier give their forensic analysis of the sensational collapse of Harry and Meghan's £15 million Spotify deal. So is this the biggest sign yet that Meghan is carving out her own commercial future away from her miserable husband? But up next, in The Clash, socialite lady Victoria Harvey locks horns with journalist Nina Mishkov on whether a top Spotify executive was right to dub Meghan and Harry effing grifters. Their words, I promise you, after the streaming giants scrap their flopcast. Let me know what you think. Dan at GBNews.com voted our poll at GB News on Twitter. The Clash, straight after this.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel. Lawrence Fox on the gender identity school row coming up, but first, The Clash. And it's been confirmed in explosive fashion that all was not well between Harry, Meghan and their podcast paymasters Spotify, with their £15 million 3-year mega deal officially coming to an abrupt end. The streaming giant has decided against commissioning a second season of the Archetype series after receiving just 12 episodes of dreary interviews with a host of woke Sussex pals. But the real knockout blow came from Spotify executive Bill Simmons in a no-holds-barred podcast of his own.
I'm going to pose this question to you. You do a lot of business deals, a lot of negotiations.
I do.
Well, let's just.
I wish I had been involved in the Meghan and Harry leave Spotify negotiation. The fucking grifters. That's the podcast we should have launched with them. I got to get drunk one night and tell the story of the Zoom I had with Harry to try to help him with a podcast idea.
Do it.
It's one of my best stories.
Do.
So what do you think? Very simple question. Is Spotify's top exec right to describe Harry and Meghan as effing grifters? By the way, if you don't know what that means, it's an American term which means that you're out to swindle someone, basically. It means you're a small-scale swindler. Let me know your thoughts. Email me, dan@gbnews.com. Vote in our poll at GBNews on Twitter. The results shortly, but doing battle on this now. Socialite and royal expert Lady Victoria Harvey, and the journalist and broadcaster and defender of Harry and Meghan, Nina Mishkov. So, Lady V, I mean, I found this utterly extraordinary because you've been in Hollywood a long time before you moved back here.
Yeah.
And Hollywood people don't talk like that. They might backstab people behind the scenes.
Yeah,
but this is the boss of Spotify, right, in terms of podcasts. He runs the commercialization of that business. For him to go out publicly and describe these two as effing grifters, that doesn't happen. This is huge. Their Hollywood dreams are crumbling, are they not?
Yeah, no, I was actually quite shocked when I first heard it. I was like, wow, OK, he is savage. I mean, he is literally going for the jugular here. And obviously it must have ended, you know, so badly. You know, I don't know how much they did get paid of the total amount, but, you know, they feel ripped off. I mean, Spotify, obviously, they were promised the world and...
Come on, 3 years.
They did not deliver.
3 years, £15 million. And they deliver 13 half-hour episodes. It's pathetic.
And did you see how many producers were actually on...
Yeah, hundreds.
Yeah.
And now Netflix wants to pull out too. So this is disastrous.
Well, we don't know. I mean, we don't know.
So that's what I've been told, Nina, and you know I have impeccable sources on this.
There's the Invictus Games. There's also they're going to be filming in Africa. You have no idea about the Netflix. But as
I was told by a top Hollywood source tonight. This was a conversation I had literally before we came to air. Quote me on this, I'll be proven right within a few weeks or a few months. Netflix wants to follow Spotify out the door and dump the Sussex.
Well, why would Netflix do that?
Why are they doing that?
Why would Netflix do that? Because their Netflix series, the Sussex's Netflix series, it's very hard to say that, actually, it topped the charts for months. For months and months and months. So they've delivered for Netflix, and they are still delivering. In terms of Spotify, that guy is just trying to make a name for himself. He's got money.
Don't be ridiculous. He's already got 5 million followers. He's one of the most successful executives in American media.
And actually, to use that language, that's not the language of a professional. That's not an executive's language. It really isn't. And let me just say about their Spotify podcast, there are 12 episodes and the Christmas episode. Having said that, that was their podcast. Meghan was top People's Choice in People magazine, which is the top showbiz magazine.
Who cares?
People pay for that.
You cannot pay for People's Choice. That's voted for by the public. And also in the Gracie Awards, she was top entertainment podcast host.
Dove dumped her because she was lazy. And do you know what I found so interesting about this Lady Victoria? What I found so interesting is, you know, when I used to speak to the courtiers all the time working within the royal family, they always used to describe Harry and Meghan as entitled, as too lazy to work hard.
I don't believe that for a moment.
I think that's been proven by the commercial sector. Just let Lady V respond.
I think that is actually one of the reasons why, you know, she took Harry to America, because she didn't want to be that person like the royal life and going to hospitals and visiting sick children and
what about Grenfell? All the good work she did there.
She wants the celebrity lifestyle. She wants
almost undercover. She did that.
Nina,
she worked so hard with those women at Grenfell.
Come on.
If they had done a good job and they'd worked hard for Spotify, Spotify wouldn't have just done them. Do you not accept that your heroes, Harry and Meghan, are just allergic to hard work?
They are not my heroes, but they are not allergic to hard work. I don't think if you looked at what Harry has achieved in his life and his hard work in the army, he is not
What's he achieved the past 3 years since moving to Los Angeles?
He has achieved a lot. He has achieved...
What's he achieved over the past 3 years?
What about his Invictus Games?
No, I'm not talking about that. He did that when he was in the royal family. Nina,
he's still doing...
Name me one thing that Harry has achieved in the past 3 years since moving to Hollywood.
Life.
So he's achieved nothing for the public?
No, he's
achieved nothing for the public, and that's why he said he was moving.
Millions also
for his from his book. He's given a load of money from his book.
So he's made money for himself.
And he's made money for himself. Well, he has to have... No, you deny that he should be able to make his own money? No, but he has to make his own money.
I'm
Otherwise, you'd say
asking you
he's
what
sponging
I've
off...
done for public service over the past 3 years.
He has worked very hard on their charities.
I'm glad you agree with me. They're about one thing.
No, not one thing. I don't.
The moolah. The greenback Lady V. That's what this is about, Lady V.
No, it's not. What am I saying? Absolutely not. And I have to say...
OK, Nina, just let Lady V respond.
So what do you want me to say on it?
Well, haven't they proven they're all about money?
What has he done? I mean, look, he has... although the book, you know, a lot of people didn't really like the book, but he obviously did make money from the book, right?
You would disagree with millions of people around the world. It's the biggest-selling non-fiction book in history.
Just let Lady V make her point.
But she has dragged him into the dirt. You know, people loved Prince Harry before.
She hasn't dragged him into the dirt. She has not.
And, you know, he's just followed her into it willfully.
She has helped him to extricate himself from a toxic situation in this country. I'd like to go back to Spotify on the podcast, because the Obamas had a contract.
Yeah, and that was cancelled as well.
They are very happy with Audible. And I bet you very soon that Harry and Meghan will be with Audible or whoever else.
But Lady V, this has damaged Harry and Meghan, though, because when you have a big company like Spotify describing them as effing grifters...
Having an exec like this coming out and calling them a grifter...
obviously a repulsive human being.
That is a very negative thing, that is going to probably have a very negative spin on things, with also, like, her representation.
Do you know what, Nina? It's astonishing to me that you can't just admit they're lazy. They're afraid of hard work. They expected to go over there and make tens of millions simply by virtue of who they are. And you know what Hollywood is like? Lady V will tell you this. Hollywood is all about what you're doing now. People are expected to work.
And she is about to sign a big deal with Dior.
But she's not ready for hard work.
Dior have denied that tonight. And let me just make one final point. You know, they want to be like Oprah Winfrey. They want to be like Ellen DeGeneres in the big house in Montecito, Lady V.
Right.
Well, Oprah Winfrey and Ellen DeGeneres worked 5 days a week on producing the most popular talk show in America. In Hollywood, you have to graft in order to achieve your billions.
You know, just by seeing like their day-to-day, I don't know, you know, it just seems like they just expect everything and just not putting in the work.
I don't think... I completely disagree
OK, well, look, you've got both sides of the argument there from Nina Mishkov and Lady Victoria Harvey. So who do you agree with? Are Harry and Meghan grifters? Munro writes, this is via Twitter. Oh, I'd say so. It's curious how the celebrity and business worlds are slowly turning their backs on these two. Surely that tells us something, doesn't it? Molam writes, I would say... that seems to be an accurate summary. They should call them Harry Hustle and Meghan the Manipulator, the perfect trickster duo. And from Raoul, Meghan was more interested in whining on about herself than engaging actively with her guests. And your verdict is now in. 90% of you agree with that top Spotify executive, Bill Simmons, describing Harry and Meghan as effing grifters. Just 10% of you say they're not. Now, coming up, more on this with our royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, who are going to pick over the sensational collapse of Harry and Meghan's £15 million Spotify deal. And rumours that Meghan is set to become the Duchess of Dior, as Nina just mentioned, a sign that she is carving out a commercial future away from her hapless husband. But next, after a school teacher scolded pupils for questioning whether a classmate could identify as a cat, Reclaim Party leader Lawrence Fox savages the gender agenda that is brainwashing our teachers and gives advice, actually, on what parents can do to protect their children from this madness. He's live with the Fox Report in mere minutes. Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss? Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
My Royal Masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier coming up, but it's time now for the Fox Report with Lawrence Fox. And a schoolgirl has been scolded by her teacher and told she's no longer welcome at school after refusing to recognise her classmate identifying as a cat. The 13-year-old pupil was made to stay after class and branded, quote, despicable by her teacher after calmly stating that there are only 2 genders. Now, the shocking incident took place during a life education lesson at Rye College, a Church of England school, believe it or not, in East Sussex, and was captured in a secret recording that later surfaced online. Listen to this.
How dare you? You've just really upset someone. Saying things like, should be in an asylum.
I didn't say that. I just said if they want to identify as a cat or something, then they're like genuinely unwell. Yeah, they're crazy.
You were questioning their identity.
I wasn't a question. I was just saying about the gender. I haven't said anything about them.
But what do you get so different as only 2 genders?
I just think it's my opinion.
You were talking about the fact that cisgender is the norm. That you identify with the gender, with the sexual organ that you're born with, or you're with. That's basically what you're saying, which is really despicable.
Unbelievable, and it's been quite a day in the gender wars because Lawrence has been embroiled in an online storm of his own after burning Progress Pride flags in protest of, I guess, Lawrence, sickening moments like what you heard at the school in Rye. So Lawrence, let's take on both of these topics now. Shall we kick off actually with the flags? Why burn the flags, Lawrence? What's that about?
The rainbow flag, which, you know, I don't even minorly object to. I think it's absolutely wonderful that this country has progressed so much that we no longer discriminate against gay and lesbian people, because love is love, right? You don't get to choose who you love. You can love a man, you can love a woman, and I think that's the most fantastic thing in the world. I really do. I know others would disagree with me, but I really do. Where I have a problem with it is this little triangle, which oddly turns into a swastika if you put it in a strange way. It is the black line, the brown line. So that's Black Lives Matter, right? So that's a Ponzi scheme that has milked millions of, good-hearted white liberals out of a load of money so that a load of black people can buy themselves mansions in Los Angeles. I take objection to that. I also take objection to the fact that your race has nothing to do with your gender, your sexuality. It doesn't matter whether you're black and gay or white and gay. Who cares? And also, fundamentally, who cares who you have sex with in 2023, or who cares who you have to love, or who you want to love? What I do.
So you think the pride flag, the beautiful rainbow pride flag, has been hijacked? I get that, but why burn it?
Because, Dan, there's another part of this flag which I really object to, and that is the child sacrifice element of this flag.
Then this is what leads us onto the school in Rye and what went on with that girl. So it's the trans ideology that you're protesting against because of the impact it's having on our children. Is that right?
Yeah. Also, look, I think, I often don't think, because as you know me well, I'm often quite emotional, but I actually really thought this one through. I thought, this is a major issue. So I've also, by the way, had the mother of this is a sad story. Do you want to hear a sad story? I've had the mother of the girl who was on that video on the phone to me today, messaging me today saying, the only thing I'm concerned about is that my daughter is entitled to a proper education. She's not going to be discriminated against. So I'm really, really worried. So the Bad Law Project and what I do is going to help her make sure that the school realise that they're not going to score any brownie points, and no woke brownie points waving their stupid little progressive pride child mutilation flag anywhere. My objection to this flag is that anybody who supports the mutilation or sacrifice of healthy tissue in children is in themselves a satanic deviant. That's what I feel.
OK, Lawrence, can we talk a little bit about the specific situation in Rye? Because it shocked so many people. Because presumably the mother is highly concerned that her daughter is going to be driven out of her school because she doesn't believe that someone's gender can be as a cat.
She's recently arrived in the school. She's obviously an extremely smart kid. When I was training as an actor, one of the things that we had to do as part of helping the local community was go and meet kids and work in schools. And what I found was the most creative, interesting and wonderful kids always had the most wacky and out there views. And they were just wonderful. And our society must encourage that sort of thinking. So this woman is terrified that her daughter is going to be discriminated against moving forward in life. Now, who wants to live in a world? We've got Howard Donald, right? We've got a guy who said men can't have periods. Where's Take That defending him? Where are the people doing it? So when I burn that flag, I burn that flag for one reason. It's to say because I can and because I stand against every single thing that flag represents. This country, the Union Jack of this country, represents everybody of all sexualities, all races, all sexual orientations, all ethnicities. It represents it. We are a genuinely progressive country. I do not need a migraine induced into my head by Sadiq Khan telling me I've got to worship some ridiculous ideology. I think it's absolutely abhorrent. And I don't mind getting punched in the face for it. But my messages today have been in the thousands of people saying I am sick to death of it.
No, well, I have to agree with you on the Progress Pride flag. I mean, I wouldn't burn it myself, but in terms of not supporting that flag and not embracing that flag as a gay man, my goodness, I'm totally with you there. It certainly doesn't represent me. Lawrence Fox, fascinating discussion. Thank you so much. Great to have you back, by the way. Now, breaking tonight, the Commons vote on the Kangaroo Court Privileges Committee findings on Boris Johnson is now in, and I can reveal the House has voted 354 in favour of the committee, just 7 against. Very important clarification here, though. Boris Johnson was absolutely explicitly clear to his supporters today. He did not want them speaking in the debate, and he did not want them voting. So while some people who were so passionate, like Bill Cash and Jacob Rees-Mogg, did speak and did vote, many other massive supporters of Boris Johnson, from Brendan Clark-Smith to Priti Patel to Dame Andrea Jenkins, did not. So this vote is a joke, as far as I'm concerned. Kwasi Kwarteng, the former Chancellor, will react after 10. Coming up, after Partygate rolled back into town over the weekend when a 2020 clip of junior Tory staffers surfaced, I asked my superstar panel whether we should be offering an amnesty to anyone who broke the ludicrous lockdown rules. But next, after a school teacher scolded a pupil for questioning whether her classmate could identify as a cat, we will be debating that in the media buzz too. But coming up after the break, it has been a disastrous few days for Harry and Meghan. They have lost their $20 million Spotify deal. They have been called effing grifters. So what's next for the couple? And is this all part of Meghan's plan to professionally separate from Prince Harry, Lady Colin Campbell, and Phil Dampier, our Royal Masterminds, on this straight after the break.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends were like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant Rebecca Reed, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Celia Walden, Kelvin McKenzie and Kwasi Kwarteng all on the way. But first, it's time for my Royal Masterminds. Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier. And the Duke and Duchess of Delusion have a real reason to whine this week after their $20 million Spotify deal was cancelled by the streaming giant after just one series of Meghan's Failed Archetypes podcast, with Spotify exec Bill Simmons slamming the runaway royals as effing grifters after they managed to produce us 13 episodes in almost 3 years. But Meghan isn't wasting any time to secure her next mega money deal for doing very little, with the Mail on Sunday revealing that she is on the brink of signing a major deal with fashion house Dior that could see the Princess of Privacy become the highest paid influencer in the world as her new super agents at WME battle to improve her toxic public image. So, Lady C, as Meghan lines up a multi-million-dollar deal with Dior, while Harry is continuing his never-ending legal battles, is this another sign that she could be carving out an independent professional future away from her husband?
Well, you know, Dan, I said it, that I was told that she went to WME to move away from being royal, and they said to her she had to forge a new path. But I think we need to be very careful what we believe, because I'm told by friends of mine in Paris who have a very good into the fashion industry, and I can't say what it is, otherwise it would give away their identity, that, you know, this is not going to be a megabucks deal. Meghan is not going to make a great deal of money if it materializes, because she is damaged goods, and they know they can get her for very little. Meghan needs a brand like Dior far more than Dior needs a brand like Meghan.
OK. And back in Britain, taxpayers bracing themselves to fork out a sickening £1 million to cover Harry's legal fees as the Ginger Whinger prepares to appeal the decision to remove his publicly funded security arrangements when visiting the UK. Just what hard-working British taxpayers really want to waste their money on during a crippling cost of lockdown crisis, I'm sure. So, Phil, how do you feel about being forced into funding Harry's egotistical legal battles?
I feel almost as confused and bad, Dan, as the fact I might have to give up wearing Eau Sauvage, which I've always... Did you notice in Spare, in fact, that he claimed, Harry, now I thought it was a bit strange at the time, he claimed that his father, King Charles, wore Eau Sauvage, and I thought that's a bit odd. I had never heard that before. I thought he used a lavender scent from Highgrove. And, of course, now it seems it's probably a product placement. But, yes, no, coming back to your question... he can bring as many court cases as he likes, can't he? And, you know, if he's prepared to pay for them and chuck money down the drain, that's fair enough. But we shouldn't have to pay a penny. And the idea that Scotland Yard and the Home Office have always made it clear that he's not going to get the security paid for, the security drill that he wants. You know, there's no way in which we should be paying for it. So if he wants to carry on with his court cases, if he wants to chuck money down the drain, that's up to him, but we shouldn't have to.
Yeah, but keep our money out of it. I mean, Lady C, this is fascinating, though, isn't it? Because it all just adds up to what Bill Simmons from Spotify described these two as small-scale swindlers. You know, they're either swindling a company like Spotify, taking 20 million, they're not delivering what they've promised. Likewise with Netflix, but the money was even higher. And now it's our money, Lady C. So do you think that, I mean, Bill Simmons, he actually said effing grifters, but do you think that description of them as swindlers is going to stick now? Because I feel it's very accurate, Lady C.
Well, of course it's going to stick, because, you know, it has the scent of truth about it. And let's remember that Harry has played the British system very well. He has made sure that he has got out of our tax system, and because there is a means test aspect and a residency test aspect to how much you have to pay back in terms of costs, he has been able to maneuver his way out of... If Harry had been a British resident and had a British income at the moment, he would have had to stump up an extra £450,000 to £500,000. As it is, by manipulating the system, he and Meghan are great manipulators. If you want to call them grifters, I would not disagree with you. I would say you're well in your right to call them grifters.
Good, well, I will.
The latest grift is on us, the taxpayer.
Yeah, no, indeed. Now, look, Saturday, unfortunately, it's been overshadowed, but Saturday marked the first trooping the colour of King Charles's reign as the nation celebrated the official birthday of the British sovereign in central London. But eldest son William may have inadvertently stolen his father's thunder as the Prince of Wales announced his ambitious vision to end homelessness in Britain in a major interview with the Sunday Times, while also releasing a heartwarming Father's Day portrait via Kensington Palace at the same time. So, Phil Dampier, what did you make of this? Is Wales guilty of pushing his father, King Charles, off the front pages, as some folk have claimed?
Well, I think it was fair enough to have the photo for Father's Day. It wasn't his fault. It was Father's Day the day after trooping. But I must admit, I am surprised that he did the interview. I mean, I would have thought that could have waited another week. I mean, I thought the headline was very misleading on the Sunday Times. I'm going to end homelessness. I mean, you're really sort of setting yourself up to fail there, aren't you? I don't think anybody's going to be able to do that. Certainly not overnight. I mean, it's a great aspiration to have, but I don't think that's going to happen. But it does make you wonder, doesn't it, whether they talk to each other, the courtiers and the different houses.
Or is that competition back, Lady C? And Lady C, what did you make? Is this too political for Prince William? Is it a bit of a concern, or was this okay?
Well, I actually think that they were complicit in announcing it because it's burying bad news in public. Because the reality is homelessness, although it's a very worthy thing, nobody wants to be living next to homeless housing. And that therefore means that there is a big problem in terms of making...
Good point. No, exactly. And it's going to be a big one for him to solve. Lady Colin Campbell, Phil Dampier, my royal mastermind, thank you both so much. Brilliant as usual. But coming up, after Harry and Meghan's 20 million Spotify deal was embarrassingly cut from the streaming platform, find out why Celia Walden thinks that the Montecito moaners are now damaged goods. But next is the obsessed MSM open Partygate back up after video of Tory staffers surfaced from 2020. Is it time to stop crucifying anyone who broke those ludicrous lockdown rules? Plus, we're going to have a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages, hot off the press. Don't go anywhere. We're back in just 2 minutes' time.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, the persecution of Boris Johnson comes to the House of Commons. Bojo's enemies, including those within the Conservative Party, voted to ban the former PM from Parliament tonight by nodding through the Kangaroo Court Privileges Committee findings by 354 in favour to just 7 against.
Boris Johnson lied. A new low in Boris Johnson's disregard for standards in public life.
For those people who are abstaining, they are guilty not just of cowardice, but of complicity with the very contempt for which Boris Johnson has been found responsible.
But remember, Boris asked his supporters to abstain, and Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, abstained as well. So my superstar panel give their unfiltered reaction to that joke of a vote next. And tonight, I'm joined by former Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng, alongside Benjamin Butterworth and Belinda de Lucy. Also coming up tonight, a sensational new twist to woke ITV's Philip Schofield scandal. A source close to the star presenter's young runner-lover says ITV refused to pay for his therapy when their affair went nuclear. But after Chief Executive Carolyn McCall boasted to MPs that they forked out for Schofield's own counselling, has ITV prioritised its shamed former star over a vulnerable ex-staffer? That's the big debate in our media buzz. And Spotify pulled the plug on Harry and Meghan's £15 million flop of a podcast series with this explosive outburst from a senior executive.
Wish I'd been involved in the Meghan and Harry leave Spotify negotiation. The f***ing grifters. That's the podcast we should have launched with them.
Star Daily Telegraph columnist Celia Walden gives her unflinching take on how the Sussex charade has finally unveiled. She's live shortly. And hey teacher, leave those kids alone.
How dare you? You just really upset someone. Saying things like should be in an asylum. I don't think that. If they want to identify as a cow or something, then they're like genuinely on that.
Now that astonishing row came after pupils refused to identify another child as a cat. So what can parents do to protect children from that sort of insane gender ideology? I'll show you more of that maddening exchange shortly. Also in Uncancelled, was this Wix's Bud Light moment?
I think I'm ever going to change some of the bigots out there's mind. If they do come in and buy that tin of paint and behave that way, then they're not welcome in our stores anymore.
Fleet Street legend Calvin McKenzie dissects the latest corporate suicide at the altar of wokeness, and I'll also show Calvin the ridiculous tweets, totally harmless as far as I'm concerned, that got Take That star Howard Donald cancelled by the baying trans mob. Plus, Nicola Sturgeon surfaces to break her silence in the wake of her SNP finances arrest.
I'm certain that I have done nothing wrong. I intend to be back in Parliament in the early part of the week.
So find out whether her doorstep denial won Queen Nick a nomination when I crown tonight's greatest Briton and Union Jackass. We'll have the first of tomorrow's newspaper front pages hot off the press in just a moment, actually straight after the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. Well, our top stories from the GB newsroom this hour. As you've been hearing, MPs have voted to approve the report which found Boris Johnson deliberately misled Parliament over lockdown parties. Here's what happened.
The ayes to the right, 354. The noes to the left, 7. The ayes have it, the ayes have it. Look!
As you've just heard, 7 MPs then voting against the Privileges Committee's findings, with 354 supporting it. And the sanctions planned now against Boris Johnson include banning him from having a pass to access Parliament. The Liberal Democrats accuse the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak of being too weak to even turn up to vote. And earlier, former Prime Minister Theresa May said the report would be a small but important step toward restoring people's trust in politics.
I will vote in favour of the report of the Privileges Committee. I urge all members of this House to do so, to uphold standards in public life, to show that we all recognise the responsibility we have to the people we serve, and to help to restore faith in our parliamentary democracy.
Well, let's bring you up to date with that developing news story this evening concerning events in the North Atlantic. A British man is believed to be on board and one of 5 people on a submarine that's gone missing on its way to see the famous Titanic wreckage 12,000 feet below the surface of the ocean. US tour firm OceanGate confirms one of its vessels and crew are missing. A man posted on social media asking for prayers for his stepfather, Captain Hamish Harding.
The pilot, who owns an aviation company, wrote on his Instagram yesterday saying he'd be taking part in a dive to the wreckage today. If you're looking at pictures on TV, these are the pictures he posted yesterday in anticipation of that dive. Well, as far as we know, the Coast Guard lost contact with the vessel about 1 hour and 45 minutes into the dive. It's about 8 hours down to the wreckage, but in the last half hour, Rear Admiral John Morga gave this update.
Location of the search is approximately 900 miles east of Cape Cod in a water depth of roughly 13,000 feet. It is a remote area and it is a challenge to conduct a search in that remote area, but we are deploying all available assets to make sure that we can locate the craft and rescue the people on board.
Admiral Morga speaking there within the last half hour, and we understand from the US Coast Guard they estimate the submersible has between 70 and 96 hours oxygen left. We'll keep you up to date on that story. Now, lastly, King Charles has attended his first service for the Order of the Garter as monarch. Thousands of people gathered outside Windsor Castle to catch a glimpse of the King alongside Queen Camilla at St George's Chapel. The Prince and Princess of Wales also in attendance. 800 guests invited. You can see there on steps of the chapel, the former Prime Minister Tony Blair. But conspicuous by his absence, perhaps, the Duke of York, not there, despite being a member of the Order of the Garter. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. You're with GB News, Britain's news channel.
Tomorrow's news tonight now in our media buzz. Just one front page in so far. And it's the Metro, which leads on this really worrying story, actually, about the submarine that takes tourists to see the wreck of the Titanic, which has gone missing with a British explorer on board. A frantic search underway in the North Atlantic tonight, as we just heard with Polly. And the paper says Brit in new disaster fear 111 years after the original sinking. I mean, this is a compelling story, isn't it? Just absolutely hope and pray that they're all OK, especially, well, we know there's one Brit on board, Hamish Harding, British tycoon and a billionaire. My superstar panel back with me now, former Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng, the journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth and the former Brexit Party MEP Belinda de Lucy. Now, breaking tonight, the House of Commons has voted in favour of the Kangaroo Court Privileges Committee findings on Partygate by 354 to 7.
The ayes to the right, 354. The noes to the left, 7.
Who are you? Who are you?
The ayes to the right, 354. The noes to the left, 7. The ayes have it, the ayes have it. Hello!
They have disdain for democracy, don't they? Did you hear that person? Clearly one of the Ramonas saying, who are you? Who are you? And actually, just remember, there would have been a lot more than 7 if Boris hadn't have told his supporters to abstain. So the vote means the former PM will now be stripped of his parliamentary pass in an unprecedented and bitter and twisted move. The vote followed further Partygate hysteria over the weekend, with the Sunday Mirror rerunning a 3.5-year-old story that has already been reported to the police and seen the Conservative Party launch disciplinary action. The paper actually acted like it had broken Watergate by revealing a leaked video from a party in December 2020 organised by the campaign team for former London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey. Now, there was nothing new other than the footage. I mean, you'll remember in an interview with me here right back in 2021, Sean, who is a proud member of our superstar panel, expressed his regret then for what had taken place.
Of an apology. Whatever happened, it was an error of judgment. So I want to own that. And I spoke to the team. Thank you, boys. Thank you, girls, for all the work you'd done. And then they went on and went long late into night. But the point is, I could have been part of the process of stopping it, and I wasn't.
But that will never be enough for the Partygate witch hunter bores, with former BBC presenters Hard Left Ramona's Emily Maitlis and John Sopel unsurprisingly leading the charge, even asking Met Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley if he will reopen a police investigation.
What's your sense that you will be?
I think we can all see the colourful nature of the video and how much it tells a story way beyond the original photo. I need to let the team work through that, but I think we can all guess which way it'll go.
Right, so there will be action.
Oh, come on! Stop people being stabbed and mugged on the streets of London, for goodness sake. Look, now, I've got to be clear about this. No one was more disgusted and enraged by the inhumane lockdown rules than myself. You know that. But the craven MSM's relentless reporting of Partygate has nothing to do with righting the wrongs of those draconian measures and has everything to do with an anti-Tory, anti-Boris agenda. So look, Kwasi, lots going on tonight, but really both of these stories are about the same thing, aren't they?
Yeah.
The Partygate vote is about the same thing as the constant focus on these videos of what happened. It's about trying to finish off Boris Johnson once and for all.
But also there's an immense sort of trivialisation. I mean, the Met this year, we've had Wayne Couzens last year, who was convicted for kidnapping and rape and murder, who was a Metropolitan Police officer. We had another, Mr. Carrick, I think he was called, who was a serial rapist. There's a serious problem with the Met. There are muggings and stabbings, as you say, in London. And Mark Rowley, who is a great police officer, I knew him when he was head of Surrey Police, has a lot on his plate. Yeah. And all we could see is Emily Maitlis and John Sopel in sort of glum-faced mode, complaining about these parties that happened 3 years ago.
But he's playing into it. He's buying into it. I mean, surely he should say we've got much more important things to do with our time. Because remember, the investigation will only lead to fixed penalty notices, but what it will do is take up an extraordinary amount of police resource and stop real crimes being solved.
And as you say, I'm amazed, given the issues that the Met has faced over the last 2 years, serious issues relating to the conduct of police officers and the failure to vet them. The fact that people are getting murdered on our streets, young people, and they haul him in to their TV show and talk about these parties that happened 3 years ago.
I mean, Benjamin, I think you're missing the point of this vote, because haven't you just turned Boris Johnson into a martyr?
Well, you wish that he was a martyr. He's a busted flush, not a martyr. And actually,
are you sure about that?
I am sure about that. Only 25% of people in a YouGov poll want him back as an MP. But when you talk about whether people like those Tory staffers in the video should get fixed penalty notices or should be investigated for that, do you know what? I think it would be an insult to the vast majority of British people, whether they agreed or disagreed with the rules, who followed the rules.
I agree.
And all those people who couldn't go to their loved ones' funerals, who couldn't have basic social activities when they were getting depressed.
But
how long does this go on?
How long does it go on? And the Metropolitan Police has limited, like all of us, has limited.
We've got to focus on real crime. I mean, Belinda,
to prioritise, what these staffers were doing 3 years ago ahead of gross misconduct from police officers.
Totally.
And, people actually getting stabbed on the streets. I think it doesn't make any sense.
But what I think is an insult is that Sean Bailey's been put in the Lords after behaving
Good
like
on
that.
him.
He admitted 2 years ago.
He's a great man.
And another one got no good.
He's a great man. And do you know what? I'm not going to have people come on here and slag off Sean Bailey because his staff members attended a drinks party years ago.
He invited them to a jingle and mingle while the rest of us couldn't even see our families.
Do you know what? I think people are so
Should there just be an
bored of
amnesty now,
this.
Belinda?
People are so bored of this now. I don't think people want blood anymore. I don't think they want finger pointing at everyone who broke the rules. I celebrated when young people broke the rules. I was happy that they were living. Well, I did.
I did.
Because no, but let me finish.
You were in cabinet though.
Because this is important. If the only finger pointing should be at those people who introduced the most inhumane lockdowns against their fellow Brit. Those people need taken into account, not the young people who bent the rules. I don't care if you're Labour, Tory, Lib Dem or anyone. If you're not responsible for making the laws, I don't care if you broke them.
With Sean, he came onto the television, to your show 2 years ago, and in a full confessional said...
Hold his hands up.
I made a mistake. It was an error of judgment. I mean, how much more...
And he took full responsibility, by the way.
How much
he didn't want to throw his young staff.
And he apologised.
Yeah.
And how much more do we want to It's like flogging a dead horse.
We've got to move on.
You never understand it. It's just like
we've got to move on.
Yeah.
We've got
Police
to move
need
on.
to do their
And
job.
actually, we are going to move on right now because Benjamin Butterworth, you might be the wokest man in Britain. But here at Dan Wootton tonight, as you know, we still invite you on every week to take part in serious, thoughtful, and sometimes very fiery
2 years.
debates for 2 years now. But over at the increasingly ridiculous Channel 4, they actually sent you to the Netherlands to debate cancel culture with another GBN regular, Dominique Samuels, while high on magic mushrooms. And doped up, the pair of you finally managed to find some common ground. Watch.
Return to the south. I don't see myself anymore as left, right, centre.
You know, I was in one tribe and you were in the other tribe.
Yeah.
But now I feel the oneness. Like, I wasn't a conscious being, but I grew afterwards. I grew like, you know, like a new plant. There was a point when all I could think when I was trying to process it was like, why am I an arsehole? Like, why am I an arsehole?
Your words, Benjamin. Look, that's just some of the excruciating 10-minute clip that was posted online. However, Benjamin, I'm so shocked because you were meant to be starring in a 1-hour Channel 4 documentary. It's now been cut down to a 10-minute online short. I mean, what a ridiculous waste of money from Channel 4. What's going on?
I mean, yeah, it probably did cost rather a lot of money. As you'll know, I don't come cheap. But, you know, the real thing that interested me as a journalist was that there's lots of evidence that things like magic mushrooms, there are other illegal drugs that are used by the NHS, can have a huge beneficial effect to people's
So you just wanted to
mental
get high and try and turn it into a political experiment. I actually think it's very irresponsible.
No, actually, I think it's really important because, you know...
I think this is promoting drugs.
No, because there are some drugs, like, I don't know, heroin, where clearly there is no good use for that. It is only bad times. But something like magic mushrooms, it's been used by human beings for as long as we've been around. And has it changed you long-term? Because it seems to have changed Dominique. Well, she says she's not left or right-wing anymore. You know, Dominique said afterwards, are you now going to be supporting Donald Trump? I said, they weren't that strong. But, you know, I think it's really important that we open our eyes to the drugs debate.
No, do you know what?
I think things like this can be used as medicine.
No. You've got to be very careful with this stuff. Channel 4, can I just say, Channel 4, which should be sold by your government, Kwasi.
Well, that was our policy.
Yeah, exactly, and it was meant to be the policy until recently. And Channel 4, they have a relentless agenda to push illegal drugs on Brits. And I just hope no one sees Benjamin acting all cool and I want some shrooms tonight. Benjamin Butterworth, Kwasi Kwarteng.
I think I put more than enough people off doing it.
Yeah, that's true. Do stand by, you put me off, but that's for sure. Coming up, as the media buzz continues, as a teacher berates her student for refusing to accept her classmate identifying as a cat, how can British parents protect their kids from the woke gender madness sweeping through our schools? My superstar panel will be back to tackle that soon. But next, with the shameless Sussex's Spotify deal ending with them being labelled effing grifters by a top exec from the firm, what has Meghan Markle got lined up next to keep those Montecito millions rolling in? And are they now just in deep trouble in Hollywood? Star Daily Telegraph columnist Celia Walden reveals all in just 3 short minutes' time. Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GBNews. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, the Sussex's reputation took another beating over the weekend with their $20 million Spotify deal being cancelled after broadcasting just one series of Meghan's awful Archetypes podcast, with Spotify exec Bill Simmons making this parting shot.
I'm going to pose this question to you. You do a lot of business deals, a lot of negotiations.
I do.
Well, let's just.
I wish I had been involved in the Meghan and Harry leave Spotify negotiation. The fucking grifters. That's the podcast we should have launched with them. I got to get drunk one night and tell the story of the Zoom I had with Harry to try to help him with a podcast idea.
Do it.
It's one of my best stories.
Do it.
Now, Dior has tonight denied that they are about to sign up Meghan on another big money deal, but the couple will surely need to secure some work from somewhere to fund their over-the-top, lavish, multi-millionaire lifestyle in Montecito. Well, I'm delighted to welcome back to the show now star Daily Telegraph columnist Celia Walden. Now, Celia, so much going on with the Sussexes here. You actually spoke to one of the bosses of Dior quite recently, didn't you, who suggested that they were a fan of Meghan, but then we've had this denial tonight.
I know. Well, that was interesting because I was just thinking today, you know, this Dior story sounds sort of huge, but actually there wasn't much to substantiate it, and I wasn't quite sure what the sort of basis of it was. But I do remember, I think it was last year, interviewing Bernard Arnault, who is, of course, the head of LVMH, which includes Dior, and asking him about Meghan. And he's a very, very sort of cautious individual, as you would imagine businessmen would be, but he did say he was a massive fan of hers. So I thought there might perhaps be some truth in it. Now we know that there isn't, which is a bit of a problem for them because they're going to need to make some money, aren't they?
They are. I mean, what are they going to do, Celia, now? Because they're in deep trouble. I mean, when you've got Spotify describing you as effing grifters, you've got Netflix wanting to walk away. Remember, they are the two biggest platforms when it comes to video and audio in the world. how are they going to get these deals to keep the money rolling in when clearly they just don't like working? They don't want to do anything.
Well, I mean, I was going to say a good start would be to actually produce something of worth, but that may be too challenging. And what I do think is interesting about this is that you can get away in the UK with an awful lot. You can ride on the coattails, ironically, of your parents. You can get away with a lot just from having been to a very fancy school. But in America, as I know from having lived out there, they have absolutely no patience for people who don't actually do the work. And what's ironic is that had they actually stayed here, they probably would have got away with doing very little and being the sort of grifters that they've been described as. But in America, this I fear. I mean, I say that. Obviously, I'm enjoying all of this immensely. But, it's going to be, as I think Mark Bukowski, the PR guy, said today, said that what happens is it's a pack of cards, and they all start. People think, oh dear. Once you become tainted, particularly in America, then everybody starts backing off at the same time. And the fact is, they can't afford for that to happen.
Well, indeed, because this started, didn't it, with the Obamas initially withdrew their support. Remember that? They weren't invited to the big birthday party. Then Oprah Winfrey did the same thing. And certainly this idea that they were going to become the darlings of Hollywood is now gone. Why would a brand want to spend millions of pounds now to associate with the Sussexes? I don't get it. They're so tainted.
Well, I think it was the Mail that I did run a very good piece a while back with every single mistake that they've made, and you couldn't even fit them all into a double-page spread because it feels like they have just consistently made the most basic sort of schoolboy errors, and all of it, if you boil it down, is not thinking ahead. They've literally just gone for the money. They've obviously ignored all the good advice that they were given, despite having, the means to have the very, very best people around them. We know that they sort of hemorrhage staff, and you end up with a situation like this, which is where you've given all the goods very, very early on, and by doing so effectively tainted your brand. And the question now is, well, now what? Which anyone of any worth would have explained to them.
Well, indeed, because what I think is so interesting about this is that within the industry, people have always known what Meghan was like. Do you know, I once spoke to a top director, I won't name him, of course, but who worked on one of Meghan's film projects before she entered the royal family. And he said to me, quite honestly, Dan, she was the most difficult actress I have ever worked with. She made ridiculous demands, both in terms of travel and personal requests that just blew the budget of a film which wasn't a big budget movie. So you've got that. Then I remember when they entered the royal family, and all of the courtiers, Celia, would say to me all the time, they'd moan, they'd say, they're entitled, they're lazy, they're afraid of hard work. But Harry and Meghan were always able to get away with it, weren't they? Because they would say, oh, the men in grey suits, they're just trying to stop us. They're just trying to make sure that we can't be a success. But I think now there's just too much evidence. Do you remember what Valentine Lowe revealed in his brilliant book? That when Meghan was on a walkabout in Fiji, one of the only times actually when she did do some hard work as a member of the royal family on one of her few tours, and she said, I can't believe I'm not being paid for this. And now you've got this message coming out from Spotify. It's just impossible to avoid, isn't it? They just don't want to work. They just believe that they can be paid millions for doing nothing, and that's not real world.
It's not. And Dan, as you know, from having interviewed lots of famous people, and I've been lucky enough as well to interview sort of, really big names like Beyonce. And one that you see very, very early on in an interview with someone like that is A, the professionalism, and B, the fact that for someone to have that kind of longevity, they have just worked unbelievably hard every single day, and they've continued to work, and they haven't been entitled, in fact, which is basically what's single-handedly responsible for what's happened to their brand, I think.
You're so right. I mean, Paul McCartney, I'd say he remains one of the hardest working people in showbiz, even today. And the problem is, Celia, they wanted a house as posh and as big as Oprah Winfrey and Ellen DeGeneres without being prepared to put in any work whatsoever. I mean, can you believe, Celia, that Harry, he didn't make one podcast. He had 3 years. He had every resource thrown at him. He has a little black book that's bulging where he could pretty much pick up the phone to anyone and say, please do an interview with me. He didn't have the brains or the imagination or the gumption to produce one podcast. It's actually pathetic.
How badly do you want to hear that Spotify executive story, though? We have to find a way to get him drunk so that he spills the beans.
Yeah, spills the beans about Mr. Cantankerous. That's what I call Harry now. He was cantankerous during that Mirror court case recently. He was cantankerous with his ghostwriter. Remember, the ghostwriter spoke out and talked about all of their fights. And he's clearly very cantankerous with the people who are paying him $20 million. It's like, mate, you're never going to get that sort of money again. You don't understand what you've thrown away. And maybe that's the problem. Royals aren't in the real world, and this is why they should stay away from the real world.
Well, that's the thing. And you know where they could have had that enormous, great big house without doing any work at all? That's right. Here.
But it wasn't big enough, remember?
No,
it wasn't big enough, that horrible little hovel at Kensington Palace. Celia Walden, absolutely brilliant to speak as ever. Star Daily Telegraph columnist, thank you so much. But coming up in Uncancelled, as woke gender ideology sees DIY giant Wix become the latest to face a boycott, and take that superstar Howard Donald as unfairly cancelled for liking a series of factual tweets, is the militant trans lobby determined to destroy the moral fabric of Britain? Well, Calvin McKenzie has plenty to say on this soon. But next, as a source close to Philip Schofield's young lover claims ITV refused to pay for his therapy despite proudly boasting of doing just that for the disgraced presenter, has ITV prioritised their star over his lover? My superstar panel thrash that one out along with more of tomorrow's front pages straight after this.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends were like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
And action.
Sergeant read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows,
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now let's return to tomorrow's news tonight. Now in our Media Buzz, more front pages are in. And a full wipeout from the Daily Mail, which leads on this astonishing story of the missing submarine at the wreckage site of the Titanic, with British billionaire Hamish Harding, one of the 5 people on board at the time of its disappearance. As fears grow for their safety 2.5 miles below the Atlantic. It's an extraordinary story. The Independent, however, reports on 2 rounds of apparent Partygate shame as MPs back Boris Johnson's parliamentary ban and the police investigate a jingle and mingle party held back in December 2020. I will just repeat this again. I think it's relevant in this case. The editor of The Independent, one of the biggest enemies of Boris Johnson in this country. I think you always have to know that when you think about why they keep doing all of these anti-Boris stories. But more on the Media Buzz now with tonight's superstar panel. Former Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng, the journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth, and the former Brexit Party MEP Belinda de Lucy. Now, you know you're living in a twisted world when students are giving their teachers lessons in common sense and biology, but that's exactly what happened at one Church of England school after a staff member called a schoolgirl despicable for refusing to accept that her classmate's gender is of the animal variety. Yeah, she identifies as a cat. Listen.
How dare you? You've just really upset someone. Saying things like should be in an asylum.
I didn't say that. I just said if they want to identify as a cat or something, then they're like genuinely unwell. Yeah, they're crazy.
You were questioning their identity.
No, I wasn't a question. I was just saying about the gender. I haven't said anything about them.
But where do you get this idea from? There's only 2 genders.
I just think it's my opinion.
You were talking about the fact that cisgender is the norm. That you identify with the gender, with the sexual organ that you're born with, or you're with. That's basically what you're saying, which is really despicable.
Now, the catfight occurred at Rye College in East Sussex after the plucky pupil said there are only 2 genders, and it escalated after that tyrannical teacher told them they could go to a different school.
My opinion was expressed in this school. No, it's not. And if you don't like it, you need to go to a different school. So I'm reporting you to Mr. You need to have a proper educational conversation.
And Kwasi Kwarteng, this is a Church of England school. I find this extraordinary.
It's pretty absurd, really, and extraordinary. And it wasn't about genders. I mean, it was the pupil said that the person identifying as a cat was weird. I mean, they're not identifying as male or female. They're identifying as an animal.
Although later in the conversation, they did also say that they believe there are only 2 genders.
Yeah, they did. That was the initial. Conversation was all about someone identifying as
Benjamin,
as an animal.
you're the wokest man in Britain. Do you support this teacher?
I think they probably could have dealt with it slightly better. I'm not sure it's great to tell kids that they're despicable in any context. But you know what? I think the idea that the teacher is standing up for the fact that there are going to be different people, given this is a school, you know, it's very possible that if there were trans or gay kids, that they won't have shared that with their peers. And I think it is actually a teacher's responsibility to avoid any kind of bullying.
Can you identify
as a cat? But I actually think you'd rather take that out of context because it's clear that the kid was giving that as a silly example.
So your gender cannot be a cat.
Of course it can't. But you tried to do that. You tried to say that as some kind of...
How many genders are there?
You tried to say that as some kind of gotcha.
How many genders are there?
There are as many genders as people want to identify as.
Well, then you can identify as a cat.
No, but you're trying to use this
following your logic.
Well, I mean, I can't finish a sentence, so what's the point? You're trying to use this as some gotcha because you think, oh, if they can't identify as a cat or a donkey, then how can they identify as non-binary, neither male nor female? But the truth is that we know in every existence of humanity, in every country, whether people tolerate it or celebrate it, that these people exist. And I think that teachers should behave in a way that doesn't allow bullying on those.
This is nuts. This is absolutely nuts. Schools are for are educating our children. We, as the taxpayer, send them to a safe space, our little kids to a safe space to learn about maths and science. No adult has the right to inflict a gender experiment on our children, certainly without the parents' consent. This is damaging children. Gender ideology is harmful to children. This is faith-based, not fact-based, and it should be totally banned from schools. Can we please stop talking in fantasy? Two sexes, girls have vaginas, boys have penises. Those little girls who were only 13, who stood up to the teachers, are heroes, because many schools up and down the country are entrenched now with this mental stuff going on in our classrooms.
The only gender experiment is the one that tells people that know they were born in the wrong body, that can't be true.
No child was born in the wrong body. Leave children alone. There's no wrong way to be a boy or a girl.
So you're saying transgender people don't exist?
I'm saying I'm saying no child is born in the wrong body. Stop trying to make children disassociate from their healthy bodies that leads to sterilisation and mutilation.
So in that case,
stop it. Leave children alone.
Why does every transgender person, they will overwhelmingly tell you that they recognised the issue with themselves from a young age, just like any gay person will tell you.
Not every transgender person. I mean, because I've spoken to many on this show.
Why do you want to target children?
Final word on this is that, you know, as a constituent CMP, I get very, very little of this in my mailbag. And yet the way in which the media talks endlessly about these issues...
Well, it's all the parents are talking about outside school. I've got 4 girls in school, and it's all the mums. Not at all. They come to me. They come to me.
Okay, they can't get a word in edgeways.
We've got to move on now, though, because ITV dramas are known for their sensational twists, but you couldn't have scripted the latest in the Philip Schofield saga. The broadcaster has been hit with yet another crisis after being accused of refusing to pay for private therapy for Schofield's much younger ex-lover and this morning runner, who it calls Person X. But after being summoned to Parliament to be grilled by MPs last week, ITV's woke CEO, Karen McCall, boasted that it was prepared to pay up for private counselling for multi-millionaire Schofield. Look.
So could you tell us what support you're giving to them at this moment in time and whether that will continue into the future?
We've remained in touch with Philip, as you'd expect, and he is receiving counselling. We're just saying that Philip is just receiving counselling, and which ITV are funding, and that he asked for that, and we're very happy to do that. With Person X, there's a whole series of duty of care all the way through.
Now, Schofield was forced to quit last month after his relationship with the employee was revealed. A source close to Person X told The Sun Phil was told ITV would pay for any therapy, but Person X has said that he was only offered ITV's basic package, which he turned down. It seems pretty dismal in light of what has gone on that they wouldn't offer to pay for a private package. So, Kwasi, ITV's moral compass is clearly broken. Has it prioritised a star here over a troubled staff member?
You know, I'm not au fait with all the ins and outs of Philip Schofield's relationship with ITV, but from what I've read, from what I've seen, clearly they had a duty of care to the employee who was more vulnerable. He's much younger, less well known, and frankly less well remunerated. And it seems bizarre that they have paid for the star's therapy and only given the much younger employee a basic package. That seems strange to me. And in their own interests, I think it would have been better, perhaps, if they'd actually extended more support to the junior employee.
It's wrong, isn't it, Belinda?
I agree, actually. I think it's the double standards that is the issue here. The vulnerability of the young person was not taken into consideration. We just saw or heard that he was shifted suddenly to another show. We haven't heard his side of the story. We haven't heard how he's doing, how his mental well-being is doing. We've only heard Philip and ITV. And I think in any company, as I've said before, when there is an abuse of power that was known, I mean, to say they didn't know, I just think is an untruth. So how can we believe what they say now about anything? Just admit to it, own up to it, and help this young man out if he needs it.
Benjamin, fair point.
I mean, I think Kwasi's just relieved that there's an organisation more chaotic than the Conservative Party at the moment.
Party isn't...
Any opportunity to
That was a low blow, but I think, you know, the Conservative Party is still in government after all this time.
ITV.
Well, there's only one person less popular than Philip Schofield in the polls, and that's Boris Johnson, so they do have...
More popular than Rishi Sunak with 2019 voters.
Well, I'm not sure that's the best endorsement. But look, you know what, I do actually think it's very dodgy behaviour by ITV, you know, because the cost of counselling, of therapy to an organisation like ITV is utterly minuscule.
And why are you paying for the multi-millionaires?
Yeah, the powerful
I think they have a moral obligation.
This is what an ITV spokesman has said on this, by the way. We are offering duty of care support to both Philip Schofield and Person X. Belinda de Lucy, Benjamin Butterworth, Kwasi Kwarteng. Do stand by, because coming up, should the pupils who challenge their teachers' woke views on gender identity be punished or celebrated? Nicola Sturgeon will also make her first appearance since being arrested over the SNP finance scandal. Can you guess what she had to say? I'll reveal all as we crown tonight's greatest Briton and Union Jackass. But next, in Uncancelled, as the boss of Wix tells shoppers with trans-skeptic views that they are not welcome into his stores. And take that star Howard Donald is cancelled for suggesting men cannot menstruate. How can we halt the crazed gender madness sweeping the nation? Calvin McKenzie has a few ideas. He's live in just 2 minutes' time.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the people's channel. Britain is watching.
It's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. And the woke mind virus continues its rapid spread across British companies after claiming a top boss at DIY giant Wix as its latest victim. So this is Chief Operating Officer Fraser Longden, who plunged his firm into controversy by claiming customers who didn't conform to views on trans rights were bigots who are not welcome in Wix stores. Watch this.
Because I wasn't doing what we were doing at Wix for them. We're not, I don't think I'm ever going to change some of the bigots out there's mind. I'm never going to win that argument with them. So we were doing it to show support to the community. They're just hot air, and they will go and buy a tin of paint in the nearest place to them. And that might have been us before, it might not have been us afterwards. And equally, if they do come in and buy that tin of paint and behave that way, then they're not welcome in our stores anyway.
Colin, that actually, I'm not joking, that makes me boil with rage, because I'm one of the people who he would consider a bigot. So I won't, shop in their stores. Sharon Davies says she won't shop in their stores. Is this their Bud Light moment?
Well, I'd be very surprised if you were in a Wix store, I must be honest with you.
How dare you!
I'm challenged by that. But on the serious point about this, the guy's a fool. I mean, most of his customers are working class men, probably in their somewhere between their 20s and their 50s, they will have views about trans very similar to the GB overall view.
Which, by the way, just means that you believe in biological reality.
Yeah, so the idea that he would say that he would like them to be banned, his shops would, if they actually decided to do it, his shops would be empty. And by the way, he'd be out on his arse as quickly as the guy, as the lady from Bud Light, who was the marketing director, and she was explaining to everybody, we need to change the image. Oh, hold on a second. We've changed all the sales because we used this kinds of trans activists. What on earth? He thinks he is in business. He needs customers. What on earth he thinks he can do by actually insulting his customers, he's mad, and actually his own board should take him aside and say, you worry about selling big buckets of cement. Don't you start worrying about people's moral positions on whether they come into our store or not. He's mad, and I think, to quote Clement Attlee, a period of silence would be welcome from this twerp.
Very good point. On a very similar theme, actually, government, Take That Star, bloke I know pretty well, Howard Donald, has been successfully handed down by the cancel culture mob simply for liking tweets that said only women can menstruate, defund Disney, and there are only 2 genders. Now, he was completely dropped immediately from a performance at Nottingham Pride, and then bounced into an apology and deletion of his social media profiles. Now, bearing in mind, he wasn't transphobic in the slightest. Has he been pounced on by this cancel culture
Do you know what?
mob?
Mind you, if you're a member of Take That and you're beginning, I mean, I'd like to know under what circumstances, what his own personal position was, and at what time he actually did the liking. I mean, could possibly alcohol have been taken? Do you know what I mean? He is mad to get involved in that debate. He can have his own views.
How sad is that?
I totally agree. But that's true of everybody. That is not just true of this guy from Take That. That's why it's a shock. It's true of everybody. Everybody's walking
but that's
around.
what we've got to fight
They work in a big company and they see things going on. If they say anything about it, it's not that person who gets slung out. They get slung out. It's a very dangerous world to have a view today.
Yeah, and I find it disgraceful when it comes to the way that Howard Donald has been treated, because I know the guy, I've known him for years. Remember, Take That, they are a gay band, effectively. Now, they don't actually have any gay members, but they are adored.
They've hardly got any members left.
Well, they're down to 3 now. They're down to 3, but very good members. I'm a big fan of Take That, Calvin. Cannot say a bad word about that band. But they are the least homophobic, transphobic, anti-anything group. The reality is they're like most of the population, they're small C conservatives, and now in show business in Britain, that gets you cancelled.
Yeah, no, it's a very dangerous world to be in. The best thing to do is to pretend to be socialists, like Starmer, right? Pretend to be a socialist, and that way, by the way, you'll be in work forever.
Which lots of celebrities have to do now.
No, they do it all the time. And in Hollywood, it's exactly the same in Hollywood. Have you seen what's happened about the Oscars tonight?
Yeah.
They're not going to allow Oscars to be granted to any film that doesn't have a percentage of minorities, a percentage, whether it's gay, black, Chinese.
Including in the storyline.
So the whole thing. So you have to make a decision. Either I think this is a... So
what, you're doing a period piece about Victorian England, for example, and you've got to somehow ratchet in a transgender storyline. This is ludicrous.
But it will win in the end. This is the bad thing. And the point about it is they can't make certain kinds of films anymore. They couldn't make The Godfather.
No.
And there's lots of films that just won't be made anymore. And so somebody will be sitting there going, well, I tell you what's this about? This is about cavemen. I just wonder whether we could just get those people over there with 3 legs. If they could just come in, that would just be fantastic.
I know. It's really worrying times. Calvin McKenzie, thank you for keeping on top of it. We'll speak to you later in the week. But it's time now to reveal tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. So, Kwasi Kwarteng, let's start off with you. Who is your Greatest Britain nominee?
So my Greatest Britain nominee this week is Boris Johnson. It's his birthday today. I've got 3 reasons. It's his birthday today, and he's actually someone who I have great respect for.
Yeah, good. And he needs it today, doesn't he, Kwasi? He's had a tough one.
Well, he's had a tough time. And in the last week, what's happened is that obviously it's his birthday today, but he's also left the House of Commons, I think, with some great achievements. I think he'll be back, and also he's landed a new job with the Daily Mail, where they are paying him a considerable amount to write a very entertaining column.
And it was a brilliant first column, actually, in the Daily Mail.
He's done well, and I would say thanks to his birthday.
Yeah, and happy birthday, Boris. No, good choice. Benjamin Butterworth, your nominee?
I'm sure he'll be partying in Truthful. My greatest
He actually doesn't like parties, that's the irony, but go on.
Is the Privileges Committee, who have, as Boris Johnson would, I'm
Don't you
sure,
mean the kangaroo court?
No, I don't. I think they believe in the sovereignty of our Parliament, and that's what they did, and they should be, they should be celebrated for that. Most people in this country are with them, not with Boris.
Belinda de Lucy, your nominee?
My nominee has to be the very courageous two, I think they're year 8 or 9, so that's 13 or 14-year-old girls at Rye College who stood up to a teacher who was using aggression and threats, trying to re-educate them, report them just for stating that there are two genders. They stood up to a bullying teacher, and I'm really proud of them. May their courage call to courage everywhere.
Well, do you know what? I have to say, they are today's greatest Briton. Those 2 year 8 Rye College schoolgirls who are now worried about their future at that school. They shouldn't be. They were absolutely brilliant. Uni and Jackass time, Kwasi Kwarteng.
So I think Nicola Sturgeon hasn't done brilliantly. The case is very simple in Scotland.
Well, let's have a look at her comeback.
OK.
You know, I can't say very much just now. What I will say is reiterate the statement I issued last Sunday. I am certain that I have done nothing wrong. I intend to be back in Parliament in the early part of the week. I'll make myself available for questions then, obviously within the constraints that I am referring to right now.
Oh, yeah, just business as usual. Benjamin Butterworth, your Uni and Jackass nominee?
Mine is Baroness Dory... Oh, I'm sorry. Nadine Dorries.
Oh, what a cheap shot.
That was a low blow.
You know, she seems to think that she's entitled to a life in the Lords, so much so that she resigned, then said, not going to resign yet. I'm going to demand an inquiry into why I'm not in the Lords. The entitlement is incredible.
Belinda de Lucy, your nominee?
Yes, mine is Penny Mordaunt, one of the wokest MPs in Parliament, for her loving speech about the Bias Privilege Committee report in Parliament and supporting Boris getting his Parliament pass removed. I don't think she belongs in the Conservative Party at all and is actually doing the party...
Well, look, I'm going to go with Nicola Sturgeon, Kwasi Kwarteng's nominee, because she just thinks it's all business as usual. And thank you so much to Kwasi Kwarteng, Benjamin Butterworth, Belinda de Lucy, my fabulous superstar panel. Thank you for your company again tonight. I'm back at 9 p.m. tomorrow night. Headliners is next. Good night. Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households.